Okay, so welcome back to Two Creeks Farm, coming to you from Bowden, Georgia. Two Neanderthals, and today's topic has to do with lying and deception. So we both have sort of an interest in that. Mark, probably from the point of view of psychoanalytic theory, and I, as usual, from the point of view of existentialism, humanistic psychology, Buddhism, that sort of thing. So lying and deception. And for me, one of the kind of touch points for this it has to do with the political sphere, the way we look at and take up lying within the political sphere. And I think that these days it's a kind of topical thing because I think President Trump has sort of inaugurated a kind of shift in how we take up lying. And it's very different from the traditional way, I think, that culturally we have viewed politicians who are caught lying. Very different from the Nixon years, which to me is probably one of the first watershed moments where lying became very figural and obvious at the presidential level. I thought another sort of pivotal moment along the way occurred with the Clinton lies, mainly about the Monica Lewinsky thing and the perjury and obstruction of justice violations that got him impeached at the time. But now we have, I think, another instance, but a very different instance. And so we were thinking of maybe exploring a little bit about what's changed with respect to lying and deception, especially as we see it across the political terrain.
Well, and it's become so ubiquitous now in society. It's so pervasive in the political world of our society, of our Western culture, that we were talking before we started taping that it seems like our generally as a culture we have such attention deficit. That's almost like our modus operandi. Because we have bills to pay, we have soccer games to get to, groceries to pick up, the second job to go to, the repairman to meet it. We always have a schedule of tight expectations and appointments and deadlines and meetings, so that we don't really care. We don't really give a shit what's going on in Washington. After a few minutes, we do for a minute. 30 or 40 years ago, it held our attention. We were enthralled by Watergate for years.
Yeah.
But not so much anymore because I think you were right. Trump has kind of taken this, made it a genre of how to just be straightforward about the lying. And everybody goes, okay, so what? No big deal. I've heard this all before, and it's probably not true anyway.
Yeah. I think you're right that part of how we react to lies and deceptions at the highest levels of government has to do with the fact that our lives are so full of so many things and it's hard to get too worked up over it. I think another thing that's going on is that there's a kind of cumulative effect that once we've had Nixon and then Clinton and now Trump, it's like we're getting acclimated to the lies and acclimated to the idea of deception and desensitized and expecting it all the time. I think that the reason why Nixon's lies were just so cataclysmic, I think, for the nation, was that it was really the first obvious sort of mass propagated across television media time when that happened. And of course it eventuated in another first, which was a sitting president actually resigning from the presidency. So that was another first that grew out of that. And the Clinton thing, I think, was sort of along the same lines. Of course, there was the perjury and all of that, the sort of legal element of that and the violation of the oaths of office and so on that went along with that. But the remarkable thing about Trump is that, like you said, no one gives a shit. It's like one after the other, and
it's so pervasive and so continuous.
Yeah.
And
I find that fascinating that we're no longer even really upset, or very few people are upset by it.
Well, and you cannot get a straight story on most of these happenings. You can get either or from I'll just use CNN and Fox because those are the two that most people are familiar with. But you get one end of it or one flavor of this, what happened from this one, and almost a polar opposite from this other one,
Yeah.
this news source. And so everybody walks away just kind of shaking their heads because you don't really know what happened, you don't really know what was said, and you don't know what took place unless you were there.
That's an interesting point, Mark, because I think what you're saying is that with the proliferation of many different perspectives, all falling under the rubric of news, but everyone has access to thousands of different perspectives that would qualify as news, whereas back in the days of Nixon and to a lesser extent Clinton, there was a much more unified sense of what news actually was and the truth actually was. And now there's this very much fragmentary sense. And I think that fragmentation of perspectives leaves, like you said, a lot of us just, well, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
I don't know what to believe.
Yeah. And so a lot of people end up not believing anything. They just, I think that a lot of people today don't have an opinion about politics in general because they don't know what's really true. They find it impossible to get really to the facts of a matter that happens in Washington or that affects us locally. And so that's, of course, that speaks directly to my intention with Jungian psychology of trying to encourage us toward his idea of individuation, which calls for authenticity and transparency and calls for integration of the lightness and the darkness that is all a part of us. But with this almost pathological kind of rhetoric, it's hard to separate yourself from that on a day-to-day basis because it's so pervasive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the lies are just sort of, they proliferate so much, and I think, okay, here, let's try this idea out. Okay, so question, why is it that people don't care so much about whether the president is lying these days? And I think with Trump, part of what's different about him is that he seemingly feels no sense of shame or moral compunction or pangs of conscience about just sort of saying the glib, easy thing that'll get him through the moment. I think that's what he's the master of, saying like the glib sort of easy thing that sort of gets him through. And the other, like Nixon and Clinton, I think were really caught up in the theater of contrition.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they were caught, there was very much a kind of sort of mass theatrical production around, first of all, the denial of the lie, and then the gradual acquiescence and the exculpatory narratives that were generated and so on. Like a great theatrical production around it, both in the case of Nixon and in the case of Clinton. But in the case of Trump, there's no theater of contrition. It's like what's different about him is that he just, I think what's really different is he doesn't feel bad and he's not willing to pretend like he feels bad.
Yeah, he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
Well, I don't think any of them really care, to be honest.
Whether we believe him or not, he has his idea of the way that things should proceed.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how we feel about that. So in that case, I suppose, especially if you're a Trump supporter, you would feel like he is trying to run this specifically like a business would be run. And a bit contrition, especially, I would think he would say has no place in business.
Yes, I think that's more or less it. Like in the business model, like there's very little room for contrition because contrition gets in the way of your profit margins. Like if you're in some kind of, sort of lachrymose, state somewhere, that's not going to make your business run any better. Like the business model would say, yeah, you told a lie or you did something bad or you hooked up with a porn star or something, get over it, move on. Whereas in the older, more traditional political model would say that no, this is a fundamental failing in your moral fabric, and that as a genuine leader of a powerful and hopefully righteous nation, you should have moral backbone and sort of moral rectitude and so on, and be sort of a not just a leader in a purely pragmatic sense, like as in the business world that would work, but a leader along that sort of dimension of morality and ethics and so on and so forth. And so Trump's new sort of variable in the equation is that, well, no, says who? Says who? Says who I have to feel bad?
Right.
Says who do I have to sort of sort of bow to the tin gods that are out there and so on. And
Yeah. And he, the other thing that's interesting too is he has a part of his base is evangelical conservatives who, in the face of this, the old videos of him on these talk shows about grabbing women's,
genitalia.
and right, that word, and these other kinds of things that have happened that he's on record with and is absolutely comfortable with,
Yeah.
because he really has no choice. And it's like, that doesn't matter. That's all. It doesn't matter. That's yesterday. That's so yesterday. He's God's man for us today to bring us back to a more godly nation, or a more something kind of a nation, and it's fascinating to watch.
Well, I think that sort of, to be honest, I don't see Trump as a pious person. Like, I never have, and I don't think he's pious now.
No.
Like his attempts to quote the Bible, or to render some kind of exegetical reading of some passage from the Bible, always strike me as really just stilted and shallow and not convincing at all.
I think he's as surprised with their embrace as we are.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, it might be a matter of the drowning person clutching at straws,
In any event, there is this new kind of a paradigm that he seems to have single-handedly developed around this, the atmosphere of how things go from happening in real time in Washington on a federal level to how they're disseminated to us through the media outlets, which he has this immense antagonistic relationship with.
Yeah.
But some of them still tend to pick him up and
Well, he's in ways the only game in town. There's only one president that they can be reporting on, so they have to fixate on whatever the president is doing. And the other fascinating thing about Trump is why he's so hated, like why he's so despised. And I don't really think it has to do with his policies. That would be sort of the first answer, but I think it actually has very little to do with that. I think it has more to do with the kind of person he is, that people hate him because he is shameless a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And he won't participate in the socially sanctioned theater of things like contrition or feeling bad about hooking up with a porn star or a Playboy bunny while he was married. Like, he just refuses to participate in the theater that we expect from politicians who get caught with their pants down, I guess literally in this sense.
And that's it. He refuses to be held to our expectations.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's also the reason why people love him.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason why people hate him, but it's also the reason why people love him.
Extremely polarizing.
And the reason why is because probably secretly most of us would like to be more like that, like a little less inhibited and hobbled by our sort of moralistic compunctions and sort of the way we've taken in and introjected various sort of ethical or moral dictates that aren't genuinely our own, that we don't genuinely feel, but we've taken them in because it helps us get through the day and relate to other people and so on, but we don't really believe it, we don't really feel it, and people love him, I think, because it gives some people hope that, my goodness, there is a way if only infrequently, at least there's someone out there who is not sort of like crippled in a way by all of this.
So maybe there's sort of a vicariousness.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so like he's sort of being the way that a lot of us wish we could be more like. Maybe not as much as he is, but at least more like more sort of like, yeah, I don't give a crap about whether you like me or not. Yeah, I don't give a crap about your little sort of moralistic agenda or whatever. I'm not going to worship your hollow gods.
Yeah.
You know?
So in a weird kind of terrifying sense, it's almost like an authenticity there.
Yeah, and yes, but the authenticity is that that he's going to be who he is, and who he is, I think, is in some ways very reptilian. Like he's a reptilian kind of human being.
Yeah.
You know, he seems like just so oily and unctuous and so on. But at the same time, like the cool part about that is that he's unwilling to pretend that he's something other than that. And that's why I think people will accept his lies, because what counterbalances all the lying is this sort of weird authenticity. It's weird because, you know, it's gone through the lenses of mass media and lots of layers of production and so on. And you know, he's the only one, for instance, in my memory, my living memory, who will actually improvise at length in his rallies and speeches and his tweets. I guess he's infamous for his tweets. I don't know much about tweets because I don't do social media.
Either,
but he's sort of infamous for these sort of what would you call them? Eruptions, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and he'll say what he thinks. Like recently, he called Stormy Daniels a horse face. I don't know if you're up on this. I read this on the internet this morning. Like he called her, and everyone's upset because they feel like he's demeaning women. That he's not demeaning a woman. He's demeaning all women, which seems like sort of an overgeneralization to me.
Yeah.
But it seems pretty obvious he's trying to demean one particular woman.
Well, so now you mentioned something that got me back toward Jung a little bit with the eruptions, so that these unconscious complexes constellate in a way that they erupt into the consciousness, and he can't help himself, apparently, especially on the Twitter thing, however that works. And it boils down to what it really does is it gives fodder to the outlets, the media outlets, to grab a hold of whichever inclination they have, either conservative or liberal kind of a position on whatever the topic is, Kavanaugh, or it doesn't matter what it is, Stormy Daniels. And that carries them along for another 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. Potentially.
My God, he is so good at that. Like he generates fodder,
billions of dollars for the media.
Yeah, for the really it's the entertainment industry. I think like news might be not the right word for it. It's more
this is almost taken up like entertainment.
Yes, it is. Well, he's an entertainer. That's he's been a businessman, but when you think about his reality show and his involvement in professional wrestling, even, I mean, he's sort of that. He's playing a heel. That's what they call it in professional wrestling. There's the faces, who are the good guys, the guys who look good, hence the faces, and there's the heels, who are the bad guys, probably who don't look so good, and he's playing, in a way, the heel.
So the lying, which is how we started this video, is really a side note or a margin note or even a footnote to what's really going on the page, which is the dialogue of what's happening and how he presents it to us and how it ultimately gets down to us in the form of news content. Mm-hmm. The lying is just almost like a coincidence in the whole scheme of things.
Coincidence? What do you mean by that?
It's an everyday occurrence almost, and it's so ubiquitous in the political world now, especially in his administration, that it's not even it's it's just a margin note. Like, oh, by the way, there's a lot of line that goes on with this. But over here on the page, you have all of the happenings of Kavanaugh and all the happenings of Stormy Daniels and all the happenings of, the embargoes and the trade wars and all that kind of thing. The line is an oh, by the way kind of thing.
I see. Sort of like an add-on.
Yeah.
Is what you mean?
Yeah, because of the entertainment value so outweighs the fact that this is
okay.
all
Now
happening.
I get you. Yeah, like really, as a populace,
Yeah.
we look to a president to entertain us more than we look to the
For the
president to
truth.
tell us the truth.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So
I guess that's what I was trying to say.
we actually prefer, perhaps culturally, socially, an entertainer, and for someone to be, we would rather someone be lying to us and not be boring than someone who is telling the truth and yet be boring.
So is that a sad testament of our?
Well, it's a little bit, yeah. Well, you can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
You know that line from that movie?
Yeah, Jack Nicholson. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That might be entering in there too.
Right.
Like, can we even handle the truth? Maybe we can't.
And maybe that's for next time.
Yeah. Okay. So, thanks for joining with us for a little while about lies, and I guess we spent more time on Donald Trump than I anticipated, but that's
It's a good
all right.
case study.
Yeah. So, thanks for being with us. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Thank you. See you next time.
Okay.